Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. A cyber attack hits a major meat producer, shutting down many of the company's operations. The White House says the attack may have come from Russia. President Biden travels to Tulsa, Oklahoma to give a speech and remember riots spurred on by race over 100 years ago. Only biological girls can take part in girls' sports in Florida. The governor is signing a bill into law saying the new measure will help protect women's sports. A sheriff near the U.S.-Mexican border shares how he's handling the increase in illegal immigration. A little-known bird virus is reported in China. This could be the very first human case of the H10N3 bird flu. A major international meat producer was the victim of a cyber attack on Sunday. The attack paralyzed the company, and shutdowns are expected across 3 continents. The White House says the perpetrators are likely a criminal organization based in Russia. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
The world's largest meat supplier, JBS, has notified authorities of a cyber attack that affected its IT systems. Operations shut down in Australia and further stoppages are expected in North and South America. The company took immediate action and shut down the affected servers, and it said its backup servers were not affected. The firm is working to restore its systems. A White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, comments on the incident.
JBS notified the administration that the ransom demand came from a criminal organization likely based in Russia. The White House is engaging directly with the Russian government on this matter and delivering the message that responsible states do not harbor ransomware criminals.
The Biden administration and the Agriculture Department offered assistance after JBS notified the White House it was attacked.
USDA has reached out to several major meat processors in the United States to ensure they are aware of the situation. We're assessing any impacts on supply, and the president has directed the administration to determine what we can do to mitigate any impacts as they may become necessary.
The company says it's not yet aware of any evidence that data from its customers, employees, or suppliers has been compromised, but JBS said resolving the incident will take time and that may delay certain transactions from its customers and suppliers. The company temporarily let go of thousands of employees without pay. The CEO said the attack has halted feeding operations and prevented cattle from arriving at feedlots. Cyber attacks have become a big concern after the Russian-based Nobelium, thought to be behind the SolarWinds hack, launched a new campaign targeting over 150 government agencies and think tanks. What's more, a ransomware attack recently caused Colonial Pipeline to shut down its entire network. Jean-Pierre says the FBI is investigating the JBS cyber attack. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
There are concerns that the cyber attack will cause meat shortages in the U.S. That's because 23% of domestic beef production went on pause when JBS suspended its computer systems in North America. And a pork plant in Iowa has already been affected by the ransomware attack. And today, President Biden arrived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where he toured an African-American cultural center and gave a speech marking 100 years since the Tulsa race riots. NTD's Steve Lance brings us the details.
The events we speak of today took place 100 years ago, and yet I'm the first president in 100 years ever to come to Tulsa.
In 1921, memories of the Civil War were still fresh for many Americans with so much bloodshed in the name of race. Emotions were still quite raw. The Tulsa race riots of 1921 were covered by the national media at that time, with a wide range of reports on the numbers of those who died, ranging from 10 whites and 21 blacks, and other reports of up to 175 total dead. At the time, Tulsa was one of the most prosperous areas in the country for African Americans, where it even took on the nickname Black Wall Street. The riots were triggered when it was reported that a 19-year-old black man allegedly assaulted a 17-year-old white girl in an elevator during a time when segregation was still in place.
The country has come a long way from segregation and slavery, with tens of thousands of Americans paying the ultimate sacrifice in the name for freedom for all during the Civil War.
If we were able to look past this and truly get to know each other, I don't believe we're an inherently racist nation.
It's not everyone, not even close. And of course, the country was founded that way, with being inclusive, and that's the way it should be.
No, I think most of the people here in America are really good, and they don't see people in terms of color. I think that it's become a very politicized situation, and that people are using that to divide us.
Native Tulsan Aaron Antis says he had a chance to interview Ed Wheeler, the historian who wrote the article for the Smithsonian on the Tulsa race riots. He said that Mr. Wheeler had to correct him when referencing these events.
When I interviewed Ed, I called it the Tulsa Race Massacre, and he stopped me immediately and interrupted me and said, that's not what it was. I interviewed over 400 people, eyewitness interviews, and it was not a massacre. A massacre is when 100% on one side die and 0 on the other. And he pointed out that 38% of the deaths were on one side and 62% were on the other.
Antis went on to say that as a native Tulsan, he doesn't feel that Oklahoma is a racist place.
And I believe that it is not an inherently racist place. I actually, my wife and I are both pretty pale-skinned Americans, as you can see, and both of my children would be considered African American.
After his speech in Tulsa, President Biden is expected to depart for Washington, D.C., where he is scheduled to meet with Republican Senator Shelley Moore Capito to discuss a possible deal on infrastructure. Steve Lance, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
And as we revisit the history in Tulsa 100 years ago, we speak to a former civil rights activist, Bob Woodson, for his take. He takes this opportunity to forward a message of unity and hope. NTD's Christina Kim reports.
It's the 100-year anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Former civil rights activist and founder of the Woodson Center, Bob Woodson, says the takeaway should be the history of Black resilience in the face of oppression.
Well, first of all, I think it's unfortunate that we only focus on the massacre and not why the massacre occurred in the first place.
He says the violence happened because white residents in Tulsa were envious of the economic success in the Black area now known as Black Wall Street. This was just around 50 years after the end of slavery. Woodson says this success exemplifies how resilient Black people were in the face of segregation and discrimination. But that part of history isn't taught.
Again, it's a false narrative that a Black should be defined strictly in terms of the oppression that they suffered. Racism was a fact of life. It was virulent, it was awful, it was destructive. But it does not define the history of Black America in this country. We had people who were born slaves who died millionaires. Well, that needs to be told as well.
Woodson says Black people are not a monolith, and you can't make generalizations about the entire community.
You can generalize about people when it comes to class, income, but you cannot do this by race. Otherwise, you're talking about Oprah Winfrey and somebody on public housing.
And by focusing on equity or equal outcomes and racial justice, we miss out on the opportunity to have substantive discussions about policies that can improve people's lives. He says the focus should be on upward mobility for low-income people, no matter their race. And despite all of the discrimination he faced during the civil rights era, Woodson never fell into hate.
None of us should be defined by the worst of what we were, but we should be defined by the best of what we can become.
Woodson says we should push back against the forces that try to denigrate the country because of its birth defect of slavery, and that America is a great place. Christina Kim, NTD News.
A Republican politician's home was vandalized over Memorial Day weekend. Congresswoman Nancy Mace posted her reaction on social media. Let's take a look.
My kids aren't even safe on the front porch of their own home. And it's wrong. We can disagree politically, but vandalizing somebody else's property is wrong and is illegal.
In the photo she posted, the graffiti includes what looks like an anarchist A symbol and other profanity. You can see in the video she took steps to remove the graffiti. She thanked the police for working to figure out who did this. And an elementary school teacher was placed on leave in Virginia after saying he won't address transgender students by their preferred pronouns. NTD's Lin tells us more.
Leesburg elementary school teacher Byron Tanner Cross voiced his opposition to gender policies during a county school board meeting last week in Virginia.
I love all of my students, but I will never lie to them regardless of the consequences. I'm a teacher, but I serve God first, and I will not affirm that a biological boy can be a girl and vice versa, because it's against my religion, it's lying to a child, it's abuse to a child, and it's sinning against our God.
Cross was condemning the school policy that requires staff to use preferred pronouns. He said he was speaking out of love for those who are suffering from gender dysphoria.
60 Minutes this past Sunday interviewed over 30 young people who transitioned, but they felt led astray because lack of pushback or how easy it was to make physical changes to their bodies in just 3 months. They are now detransitioning.
Cross was placed on administrative leave 2 days later. A spokesman for Loudoun County Public Schools confirmed to a local radio station it is because of state and federal law regarding personnel files. Alliance Defending Freedom said it sent a letter to Loudoun County Public Schools last Friday on behalf of Cross. They stated in the letter, "This isn't just about a pronoun. LCPS wants to compel teachers to endorse and advance an ideology." The school system responded to the letter, saying it would not reinstate Cross, according to the Alliance. Lin, NTD News.
Florida is now the latest state to limit women's sports to biological women only. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed the Fairness in Women's Sports Act into law today. The bill requires all sports teams at public schools and colleges to be designated on the basis of biological sex only. The same rule also applies to schools competing against public schools. The governor says in Florida, they believe in protecting the fairness and integrity of women's athletics. The Florida legislature passed the bill in April, largely along party lines, and it will take effect July 1st. The Florida Democratic Party accused DeSantis and GOP lawmakers of discrimination. But sponsors of the bill say it's about ensuring women can compete. They also say the measure will benefit women. DeSantis also dismissed pressure from corporations and the NCAA. He says in Florida, they're going to do what's right. They'll stand up to corporations which are not going to dictate the policies in that state. With illegal immigration staying at record numbers, NTD has an exclusive interview with a sheriff in Texas near the Mexican border. He told us what he's doing to protect his county from the increase in illegal immigration. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
This blue ribbon to this pole along the highway. It's there to show illegal immigrants where to meet to be picked up by a human smuggler. Deputies in Refugio County went there to investigate. They dispatched a drone to search the area, but they didn't find anyone. Refugio County is located along the Gulf Coast between the Mexican border and Houston, Texas. 7 counties away from Mexico to be exact, as explained by Refugio County Sheriff Raul Pinky Gonzalez. He says they have been dealing with illegal immigration for years, but since January, the amount of human smugglers and illegal immigrants has doubled. The sheriff says smugglers are now fitting up to 20 people in one vehicle.
They're going 120 miles an hour, driving, going through bar ditches, going through the brush, going through fences with these people in those vehicles or in back of pickup trucks, and a lot of them have been injured. They have no regards for human life, these people that are smuggling them, I'm talking about.
The cartels are allowing people to apply online to smuggle people to Houston for about $1,000. The sheriff says Houston is like a hub city, and from there, the illegal immigrants go to other places throughout the United States. One of the main concerns for the sheriff is people's safety. He feels it would be safer for the women and children if they could come to America legally.
And little bitty kids, I'm talking about little 4 or 5-year-old children that were in those groups of people. But mama wasn't there, daddy wasn't there, big brother, big sister they were there by them. The parent just sent them to come to this country to live a better life by themselves. And a lot of times we'd find, like in their pockets, we'd find a phone number or something, a name of a person in their pockets.
The sheriff has received financial help from the federal government through Operation Stone Garden. These grants are provided to help various law enforcement agencies to enhance security along the country's borders. But Sheriff Pinky says he could use at least double the amount of funding he is given. He said if it wasn't for the federal grant money, he doesn't know what he'd do. On the other hand, he doesn't agree with how President Biden is dealing with illegal immigration and the Mexican border. The sheriff says a lot of the illegal immigrants are felons and rapists, and they don't know who is coming across the border. He says it's very important to document every person that is coming into the country, like every other country.
He's not abiding by these laws. He's not abiding by the laws. We enforce laws. I don't make the laws, but we enforce the laws, and a lot of them are good laws, and that's all the president or anybody else has to do. If you don't like those laws, let's change those laws. Change them. But right now, they're still in place. Don't ignore the laws that we have in place.
Sheriff Pinky continually emphasized the safety of everyone. He explained that people have the right to defend themselves if they feel scared. But he doesn't want people to start shooting anyone they see on their property because illegal immigrants are humans too. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And the Texas governor has just declared a state of disaster today in southern Texas counties over the border crisis. He's authorizing state and local resources to protect landowners in these counties from trespassers that damage their property. The governor also promises to provide more resources to combat the influx of illegal immigrants and enforce state and federal law. He says Texas will take away licenses from child care facilities that partner with the federal government in sheltering illegal immigrants. And over 100,000 illegal immigrants are coming into the country each month, and more are on their way. But many of them are warning against taking the dangerous journey, saying rape and murder are common along the way. NTD's Allison Lee has the details.
5 gente muerta.
3 young migrants tell war correspondent Michael Yon that they saw rape and murder throughout their journey to the U.S. The 3 men were at a migrant encampment in Panama, and they've already traveled through the jungles in Colombia from their home country, Venezuela.
La verdad le voy a decir a ustedes, la travesía no es fácil. Hay muertos, hay niños violados, nos atracan. En realidad no es bueno para todo inmigrante que quieran pasar por esa selva. Se lo estoy diciendo de pana. No lo recomiendo.
The young men fled Venezuela due to poverty under the Maduro regime, and they hope to make it to America in order to support their families.
Está en Venezuela pasando hambre y crítica, por eso no tiramos aventura por ahí. Que no se lo recomiendan a nadie, por favor.
Venezuelan men recount that they were robbed of their food and money while traveling through the jungles to Panama, and they are seriously warning against anyone from taking women and children on the dangerous journey.
Niño, 2 niños por el camino, 5, 2 mujeres, 3 varones, 5, 2 niños. Violaron en el camino con nosotros, violaron a 3 personas, 3 niñas de 13, 12 y 14.
Jan also writes about concerning health conditions in his report on the migrants. He says many rivers that migrants have to cross are ripe with waterborne diseases, and many migrant babies have diarrhea. In April, Customs and Border Protection apprehended over 178,000 illegal border crossers. Most of them are single adults, but CBP agents also apprehended almost 14,000 unaccompanied minors from the Northern Triangle countries. The agency is set to release the numbers from May next week. Allison Lee, NTD News.
According to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or EEOC, businesses can require that their employees get the COVID-19 vaccine without violating federal laws. The agency issued this guideline on Friday. As long as they don't violate the Americans with Disabilities Act or Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which prevents discrimination, they can require vaccines. But state and local laws can impact whether or not businesses can issue these requirements. Employers will also have to make reasonable accommodations for workers who can't or won't get vaccinated due to religious reasons, pregnancy, or a disability. And a new virus has emerged in China. A man there may be the first person to contract the H10N3 bird flu. NTD's Allison Lee has the details.
Chinese health authorities announced Tuesday they diagnosed a 41-year-old man with the H10N3 strain of bird flu last week. They said no other cases of human infection have ever been reported anywhere else in the world. The patient started to develop a fever and other symptoms on April 23rd and was hospitalized April 28th, but authorities didn't identify the virus as the H10N3 bird flu until May 28th. Chinese authorities didn't explain how the man got the virus, but said he is in stable condition and ready to be discharged from the hospital. It's not clear if he worked with poultry. Beijing also claimed that the risk of the virus spreading on a large scale is very low. An animal disease specialist at the UN Food and Agricultural Organization says this strain is not very common. Only 160 cases of it were reported from 1978 to 2018, mostly in wild birds in Asia. There aren't any cases detected in chickens yet. The last major outbreak of bird flu among humans was in 2016 and 2017. The H7N9 strain killed around 300 people in China. Allison Lee, NTD News.
3 Republican senators toured Israel today and yesterday. They took a look at the destruction caused by Hamas terrorists and met with Prime Minister Netanyahu. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more on the senators' trip.
Senator Lindsey Graham said he wants to find an alternative to the JCPOA, or the Iran nuclear deal, that allows nuclear power but will not create a nuclear arms race.
To every American, what happens with Iran matters to not only to America but to the world. The worst possible outcome for the world is allow the Iranian regime to acquire nuclear capability.
Ted Cruz and Bill Hagerty also met with Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu, who thanked them for their unwavering dedication during the latest violent outbreak between Israel and Palestine.
Well, we have no better friends, and I mean that. Tested over time.
They also toured an Israeli city, Ashkelon, which was destroyed by rocket attacks from the Hamas terrorist group.
This is a home where an elderly woman and her caretaker were when a Hamas rocket came and hit the home.
The elderly woman made it out in time, but unfortunately the caretaker did not.
You can see where the rocket came through the roof. It has torn the house to pieces. This is cowardice at its worst.
On Tuesday, Senator Lindsey Graham said that the only reason more Israelis are not dead today is because they have the ability to defend themselves. That's because Hamas has an agenda to wipe them all out.
Literally every man, woman, and child driven into the sea. And if you don't get that, you don't understand the conflict.
The senators were invited to make the trip by the Israeli government, and they said they made the trip to figure out how they can strengthen the alliance between the U.S. and Israel and not to attack President Biden, as Senator Lindsey Graham made clear in his remarks. And a growing list of GOP senators are sponsoring a bill to impose sanctions on individuals, governments, or any entity that has supported terrorist groups like Hamas, which has spent weeks bombing Israel. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
President Biden unveiled his $715 billion defense budget last Friday. While it showed plans to spend more in programs seeking to counter China's military buildup, some defense experts are still concerned if it's really enough to outpace China.
President Biden's defense spending request for fiscal year 2022 is $715 billion. And there's an additional $38 billion earmarked for defense-related programs at other agencies. That will bring the total national security budget to $753 billion, a 1.7% increase over 2021. However, defense budget expert John G. Ferrari is concerned that this increase can't even keep up with inflation.
Recently, the savings bond, the inflation index savings bond, is now yielding 3.5%. Right. So if that's an anticipation of inflation of 3.5%, right, the department is in a lot of trouble.
The defense spending request shows it will invest in troop readiness, space, and nuclear weapons technology. In addition, more than $5 billion will be spent on the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, which will fund radars, satellites, and missile systems in order to counter China and focus on competition in the Indo-Pacific region.
When the summary touches briefly on the China threat and the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, it notes the importance of cybersecurity, but highlights none of the myriad investments required to compete militarily with China.
Elaine McCusker, resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, is concerned that China's defense budget is actually outpacing the United States. In 2021, the Chinese military budget increased by 6.8% to 1.35 trillion yuan, which is roughly $209 billion.
Greatest long-term challenge to the United States, and strengthening deterrence against China will require DoD to work in concert with other instruments of national power.
The defense budget request will also invest $27.7 billion in modernizing the U.S. nuclear triad and increase funding for the Space Force by $2 billion. But the Navy's shipbuilding request was only 8 new warships versus a plan for 12 under former President Trump. Ferrari believes that being undermanned on its ships is the main challenge of the Navy. Biden's budget requests are commonly an outline and starting point for negotiations with Congress, and the lawmakers will ultimately decide how funds are spent.
A modest Memorial Day ceremony in Delaware seems insignificant, but to some veterans in attendance, such events may be the key to the future of America. NTD's Sapphire Quarter brings us their stories.
Hundreds of men, women, and children gathering at the Kent County Veterans Memorial Park in Delaware, listening to Wee Wildeskog talk about his experiences in the Vietnam War. For one of its organizers, the event is more than an opportunity to say thank you to his fellow soldiers who gave their lives during the conflict. It's a way to continue protecting his country. He says it's important for people to know more about recent American wars and why America got involved in them.
It's because our country believes in a free country, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. That's why we survived.
He says education through history is important so that people can make the right decisions going forward. Another veteran, Joseph Starch, agrees that the younger generation was not taught enough about the Vietnam War.
A lot of people don't even know what Vietnam was about.
He was wounded twice on the battlefield, once spending 6 months at Valley Forge Hospital recovering. He says he went into the war because he wanted to be like his father.
Pretty much got what I wished for, you know. I was drafted, and I'm happy that I served my country, and I'd do it again.
He says he likes to thank those returning home from Iraq and Afghanistan for their service because he says no one ever thanked him. Sapphire Quarter, NTD News.
Still to come, an officer was attacked by a man in San Francisco's Chinatown. Fortunately, bystanders came to the rescue. That and more on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented MyPillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
%90 of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
A female police officer was attacked by a man in San Francisco. She was responding to a call that he was threatening locals. Luckily, help was nearby.
Surveillance footage caught the moments a man allegedly attacked a female police officer in San Francisco's Chinatown. He was allegedly making threats towards Asian women in the area. A group of bystanders assisted the officer before police backup arrived. San Francisco's ABC 7 News identified the man as Geraldo Contreras. ABC 7 reported that Contreras, 33, allegedly said he specializes in killing Asian people. The report claimed he has a record of prior arrests for assault. Video shows the officer approaching Contreras with a beanbag rifle. When she asked if he had a weapon, he turned it to her and a fight followed. ABC 7 reported that the officer sustained minor injuries. Officers later arrested Contreras for allegedly assaulting, battering, resisting arrest, and trying to take the officer's weapon.
One county deputy officer in Southern California was killed in the line of duty at the end of a motorcycle chase on Memorial Day. The incident took place in a desert community near Joshua Tree National Park, about 120 miles east of Los Angeles.
The slain officer was 43-year-old Sergeant Dominic Vaca, who served 17 years with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department at the Morongo Basin Station. At around 12:33 p.m., Vaca, along with other deputies, were conducting an extra patrol for off-highway vehicle violations when they spotted a man riding a street motorcycle without a license plate. The deputies attempted a traffic stop, but the suspect led them on a chase. A short time later, the deputies found the motorcycle, but the rider was gone. As they approached the motorcycle, the riders started firing at them. Vaca was struck by the gunfire. He was airlifted to a nearby hospital where he died.
The gunshot wound he sustained earlier today was too severe for him to overcome. Our prayers are with him and his family as we all mourn this difficult time.
The suspect was also shot and killed in exchange of gunfire. The sheriff's department says their investigation is ongoing.
The Supreme Court ruled that a California church will be receiving a settlement payment from Governor Gavin Newsom. The decision comes after the church challenged the state's restrictions on houses of worship during the pandemic. NTD's Jason Blair has more.
A settlement was reached last month ordering Newsom to pay $1.35 million to a church in the Los Angeles area. Harvest Rock Church filed a lawsuit last year over the governor's COVID-19 lockdown restrictions. The settlement amount is to cover the fees and attorney costs from the lawsuit. The terms also say Newsom's administration can no longer enforce pandemic restrictions on houses of worship. Attorney Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel represented the church. He said, the church stayed open during the lockdown and the pastor and parishioners were threatened with daily criminal charges that were up to a year in prison. Reverend Che Yan, the founder of Harvest Rock Church, released a statement saying, after nearly a year-long battle defending our religious freedoms, our lawsuit has reached a permanent settlement in our favor. I am thrilled to see the complete reversal of the last discriminatory restrictions against churches in California. On March 19th last year, Newsom put into order a statewide lockdown with only essential businesses remaining open. Churches were not included in this category. The case went to the Supreme Court in February. The court ruled 6-3 in favor of Harvest Rock Church to remain open with restrictions of no more than 200 people, and singing and chanting would not be allowed. A spokesman from the Newsom administration released a statement saying, Governor Newsom has always put the health and well-being of Californians first, resulting in the lowest positivity rates in the country and over 36 million shots in arms, more than any other state. This settlement resolves this case while providing clarity and certainty to the public around the public health standards applicable to places of worship following the recent rulings by the U.S. Supreme Court. Newsom is also currently facing a recall effort, partly in response to his handling of the pandemic. Jason Blair, NTD News, California.
Reparations are under review. On Tuesday, a task force held their first public meeting to review reparations proposals for African Americans. We hear more from NTD's David Lamb.
Last September, California passed a bill that set up a task force to study and develop reparation proposals. It would be for African Americans impacted by slavery. The 9-person task force held their first public meeting this week, where they took their oaths. State Secretary Shirley Weber, who authored the bill, says people still feel the impacts of slavery. She wants apologies. One of the members said reparations would be similar to the GI bills, which provide benefits to veterans.
Providing free education for descendants of slaves at our Cal State and UC system. Providing first-time home buyers assistance. To provide Medicare and child care.
California congressional candidate Joe Collins says he thinks the bill is a, quote, waste of time.
I think that the United Nations bill that they already have concerning reparations is already something that was put together for these things to take place.
Secretary Weber defended the measure.
Some asked us why in California, why not somewhere else? Why did we not do it in the South? But we came to understand very clearly that California has the ability and the power to do it.
But Collins says this shouldn't be localized to California.
I think reparations have to be a federal government type of situation, since slavery or whatever injustice that they're claiming to be done was done by the federal level and not the state of California.
The governor's office called the task force, quote, a first-in-the-nation effort by a state government to take an expansive look at the institution of slavery and its present-day effects on the lives of Black Americans. But critics say reparations are difficult to calculate and distribute, and it creates more division. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
California farmers are facing extreme drought. They are changing planting plans and finding other ways to make a living. Here's NTD's Eileen Ang with more.
Joe Del Bosque is leaving a third of his farm near Firebaugh, California barren this year. Despite extreme drought, he hopes to get enough water to produce a marketable melon crop. Farmers across California say they expect to receive little water from state and federal agencies that regulate reservoirs and canals. Farmers have decided to leave their fields empty, plant more drought-tolerant crops, or seek new income sources altogether.
We've never been through this situation before. For whatever little water we've gotten in the past, and sometimes we don't get a lot of water, but at least we know what we got, and we can use it when we need it, and we can plan. This year we can't plan because we don't know when we'll get water that we are trying to get for these crops.
The 72-year-old grows melons, asparagus, sweet corn, almonds, and cherries on his 2,000-acre farm. He said he could lose more than $500,000 in income and put many of his 700 employees out of work.
It's an economic disaster. We don't plant crops, we don't have jobs, we don't produce food. And as we saw during the pandemic, this industry is essential for everyone. We work to feed everybody.
Agriculture is an important part of California's economy. The Golden State is a top producer of vegetables, berries, nuts, and dairy products. The last major drought from 2012 to 2017 reduced irrigation supplies to farmers, forced strict household conservation measures, and caused deadly wildfires.
This year is the worst drought, the worst year since 1977. It's worse than the last drought we had in 2014 and 2015. So our water supplies are very deficient this year, and we simply don't have enough water to be able to supply our water service contractors with the water supply. So we've had to reduce their allocation to effectively zero.
Nearly 40% of California's 24.6 million acres of farmland are irrigated, crops like almonds and grapes in some regions needing more water to thrive. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
Coming up, CCP virus cases continue to surge in South China's biggest city. Anyone that leaves the city must show a negative test result from within 72 hours. At least a dozen new cases of the CCP virus appear in South China's Guangdong province. The youngest patient there is only 7 years old. Chinese authorities are responding with strict travel restrictions. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
All eyes in China seem to be on Guangdong province and its escalating pandemic situation. As of June 1st, 13 new cases of the CCP virus or coronavirus were found province-wide. The youngest is an asymptomatic 7-year-old girl. That's according to China's official figures, data we can't verify independently. On Monday, Guangdong officials admitted that the local patients are infected with a strain of the virus first found in India. According to British government agency Public Health England, the mutant variant is known to be highly contagious and likely more transmissible. Strong control measures have been taken in Guangdong's capital city, Guangzhou. Travel restrictions went into effect starting Monday at 10 p.m. Anyone seeking to leave the city must show negative test results from within 72 hours of their departure. A newspaper reporter visited local test centers and found many centers are already fully booked, leaving travelers to search for availability at farther locations in order to meet the requirement. Discussions about fleeing Guangzhou have become popular in recent days, alongside with pictures of crowded local highways and packed train stations. Guangzhou's neighboring city, Foshan, is also planning a partial lockdown starting Wednesday. There, people will only be able to leave the city if their official health QR code shows green, meaning clean bill of health. The codes are used across China as part of contact tracing. Alternatively, those who want to leave can also show a valid negative test result. Many areas in the city are applying their strictest prevention measures and are putting residents on lockdown inside their homes. Other communities are restricting gatherings and the use of public areas. China's flood season continues full steam ahead. Many regions in South China's Guangdong province are experiencing heavy rainfall. Entire city blocks can be seen flooded. Flood levels in areas reached many feet. Cars are almost entirely submerged in water. But it seems some residents are prepared. Online footage shows locals using rafts and canoes to travel on flooded streets. The flood has thrown a wrench into local development projects as well. It has also barged into local businesses and homes, but it's unclear how much in damage the flood has caused in total.
Argentina was once the world's 5th largest beef exporter. Now the country's government is restricting beef shipments abroad to contain runaway inflation. They blame it on high demand from their biggest customer, China.
In Argentina, grilling beef on the barbecue is a human right. But now red meat eaters have to reduce their intake and change their diet.
We have barbecue once in a while, but now we are combining it with other cuts to replace the traditional barbecue. Point of the shoulder, rump tail, pork butt.
This is because of an over 60% surge in beef prices last year. According to a report by Argentina's Meat Industry Chamber, the country's per capita beef consumption plunged to a 100-year low in April.
Many people bought cuts that are more expensive. Now I'm seeing that they're asking me if we have another option, something a little more accessible, because the majority of people buy for the family. So they are trying to buy cuts that look good, but are at a more accessible price from what they were having before.
Many factors are driving up prices: rising feeding costs, a shortage of slaughterhouse workers, and high demand from China. Since 2018, China has been ramping up meat imports to offset declines in its hog herd due to African swine fever. Beijing recently suspended some beef imports from its number 3 supplier, Australia. It was due to diplomatic tensions. On May 17th, Argentina halted shipments of beef for 30 days, as annual inflation approaches 50%. But farmers protested the ban immediately with a halt on local livestock trading. They claim most of the exports are older cows that Argentines don't consume domestically.
The measure, analyzed coldly, is that if there is more meat, the price will drop because the supply is increasing. It is not the meat that we consume. It shouldn't be.
Argentina's ban is expected to shake up global meat markets and cause buyers in China to turn to Brazil and the U.S. U.S. beef exports to China hit a monthly record in March. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the U.S. sold over 16,000 tons of beef to China.
Leaders from the world's Group of 7 nations will gather in Cornwall, England in June. The summit will mark the group's first in-person meeting in 2 years. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will host the G7 meeting at the Carbis Bay Hotel. The building overlooks a picturesque coastline and is surrounded by rural scenery. Johnson himself has close ties to Carbis Bay, as his paternal grandmother's family are from the area. The 47th G7 summit will be the first since 2019. It comes after a planned meeting in the U.S. was cancelled last year due to the pandemic. Representatives from Britain, the US, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan will be joined by European Union leaders Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel. Australia, India, South Korea, and South Africa have also been invited to attend. French President Emmanuel Macron has suggested inviting the Belarusian opposition. Britain said there were no plans to invite more participants at the moment, but added the government's behavior would be discussed. Western countries are keen to show their support for opponents of Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. That's after he ordered a fighter jet to force down a passenger plane in Minsk on May 23rd. Authorities then arrested passenger and dissident journalist Roman Protasevich. A range of other issues could be up for debate at the summit, including the ongoing pandemic, China, and former G7 member Russia. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Coming up, Italians are commemorating famed poet Dante on the 700th anniversary of his passing. Local stores are selling copies of his beloved Divine Comedy in multiple languages. All that and more here on NTD News.
If you're like most of us, you're probably getting fed up with the nonsense that's going on in the banking system. Did you know that top U.S. banks have recently amended their depositor terms and conditions to include the words bank failure and what's required of you in 24 hours if, or should I say when, it happens? Don't get blindsided by your bank. Call GSI Exchange today to pick up your complimentary copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide at 866-424-2382. We'll also send you the required format to file with your bank within 24 hours of their failure, which is now required by the top banks to avoid freezing of your funds. Yes, the top banks can now freeze your money. The world is in a strange place, and banks are constantly changing the rules. So stay on top of the current events that really matter by calling GSI Exchange and requesting your free guide at 866-424-2382.
London scientists have found a type of coffee bean that was lost for over 60 years. An expert believes this species has great potential for commercial farming.
Researchers at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Kew have rediscovered a long-lost coffee variety. The story started 20 years ago. Aaron Davis, head of coffee research at the Gardens, discovered a mysterious sample of Stenophila beans in the Kew archives. But its plants were no longer farmed and had not even been seen in the wild since 1954. So in 2018, Davis and a team of researchers headed to Sierra Leone in search of the long-lost species. They went to where it was last seen but found only one solitary plant, so they explored a similar forest elsewhere in the country.
We travelled towards the Liberian border. Again, another lengthy trek through the forest, and when we reached the correct elevation, the correct sort of environment, we did in fact find a healthy population of Stenophila coffee, which was absolutely fantastic.
There are 124 species of coffee, but the world relies on two varieties for 99% of its coffee, Arabica and Robusta. Arabica is known for its smooth, elegant taste and requires a cool tropical climate to grow. Robusta plants can withstand higher temperatures but are considered inferior in flavor. This rediscovered species could challenge them both as the future of coffee.
That Stenophila coffee can grow at an ambient mean annual temperature 6.2 to 6.8 degrees Celsius above Arabica. So compared to Arabica, it's extremely heat tolerant. And that is unique and exciting.
So how does it taste? In 2020, the team brought back a small quantity of beans and took them to high-end coffee company Union Coffee.
The really surprising thing that during the tasting was that this Stenophila actually tasted like an Arabica coffee from a well-developed origin that we would look for commercially. And that was really a revelation.
The expert tasting panel awarded the coffee a speciality score of 80.25. That means the new species has got a speciality status. Tors says, on a well-managed commercial farm, the quality of the beans is likely to rise even further.
This year marks the 700th anniversary of Dante's death. Fans across Italy are starting multiple events to commemorate the famed poet and his enduring works.
A well-worn copy of the Divine Comedy in her hand, every day at dusk she joins the reading around Dante's tomb to honor the great medieval poet. Dante died here in Ravenna, Italy in 1321. As travel resumes, stores nearby are housing copies of the Divine Comedy in 60 languages for foreign tourists.
It always fascinated me. I always liked it, even when I was at school. And what they've decided to do here in Ravenna immediately captivated me. It started in September last year, and it goes on. They are thinking of doing it forever. At least they'll do it until next September, and I will be here.
The Divine Comedy depicts the journey through hell, purgatory, and heaven. Dante's verses on the laws of good and evil remain symbolic prophecies and eternal themes for mankind. The organizer believes reading is the best way to honor Dante, but it is only part of the year-long commemoration of Dante's 700th anniversary. This exhibition at the San Domenico Museum in Forlì brings together 300 pieces of art from all over the world. They include illustrations, books, and paintings that influenced Dante and ones that he inspired. According to the museum's director, it's no surprise that Dante continues to fascinate people through the ages.
Dante speaks of salvation and pardon, things very fundamental to human life. For this reason, art couldn't do other than return an infinite number of times to Dante and his themes. He took history, mostly of his time, but not only of his time, and gave it eternal life.
The museum put on the exhibition in conjunction with the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and it will run until July 11th.
Stunning new footage shows a drone flying into the lava spray of an erupting volcano. Let's take a look.
A quick look at a landscape shadowy and we're off, soaring feet above the fiery river flowing down the side of the Fagrafellsfjall volcano in Iceland. After tens of thousands of earthquakes, warnings of what was to come shook the landscape from late 2019 to early 2020, the Shield volcano finally erupted on March 19th. It's been active ever since. This ill-fated drone is giving us an immersive and unique experience of what it's like to be up close to an active volcano. Way too close. The drone operator says it wasn't an easy flight.
Now around the volcano where you have the hot gases emitted that cause turbulences all around it and hot rocks raining onto you, flying these things is even more tricky.
A tourist attraction, the local government considers Fagrafellsfjall to be fairly harmless to the locals and local infrastructure.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.